No, unfortunately. And by the way, no, I wouldn't know enough to teach you very experienced Vajrayanis anything.
Hello, how are you? Recovered?
No incidents whatsoever.
I won't go. Oh, your prayers. Good morning, everyone. Just if those who are joining us. Oh, yeah, we get a call. Danny wrote like in the balcony, not online, we get feedback. If you haven't signed in here or down the shop, somewhere on the property, please just. Thanks.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Sorry, folks.
Sunny, hi. Hello? Yes. Yeah. Oh, I've got Rob's phone. I can give it to Sandy. It's all right. Okay. No, she's here. I'll give it to her. Yeah. All right. The office. The baby was me.
Right. So we're going to start with 100 deities of the land of joy. Then refuge and bodhicitta as a way of correcting motivation. So
Page 7.
page 7, it's also
Harder to say here the 100 deities of Shiva and the figure of the cloud is in front of extremely white king of Dharma. These punch here together with the sun. In the sky before me on a wide throne lotus moon, my perfect figure was smart to delight, supreme privilege and earth in my mouth. Please abide under the honest teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands your holy speech is excellent explanation. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember,
I prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incense lies, portions of cloud-like offerings while functioning. I offer to you the supreme prayer. Whatever number of body, speech, and mind, especially as opposite to the three from beginning of this time. I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strive from us to learn and practice in the general the venom of gate body concerns, Savior was sincerely rejoiced in your extensive gifts.
Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the
And
billowing
the clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of Dharmakaya.
Please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle, those to be subdued exactly as the heat. May whatever virtue I have collected teachings and all transmigrate beings.
And in particular, may cause the essence of the constitution to shine forever. Prevention method, reverence in the body, salvation in the world. Akunanta Shinracho Borashu Koro Ratna Mandala Kamriya.
By the force of having fervently requested in this way, holy beings of white light are emitted from the heart of the perfect pure Father and Son, and combining into one into my son, white nectar, the colored milk flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative harms, obscurations, and their increase without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. From page 13, we'll recite 5 line center there in the middle 3 times. Leave me say wait to
Touching changes to make the one for example, children somewhere, catching kids and get some help. Lost some drug patient, lots of Sanghi Chunan Sogi Chanala, Sanji Badu Dami Kansuji, Dami Suji, Bibitsonu, Dola Beji, Sangi Rubarasho, Sanghi Chunan Sogi Chanala, Sanji Badu Dami Kansuji, Dagi Suji, Bibitsonu, Dola Beji, Sangi Rubarasho, Sanghi Chunan Sogi Chanala, Sanji Badu Dami Kansuji, Dagi Suji, Bibitsonu, Dola Beji, Sangi Rubarasho. 강기 투쟁에 손에 다와 탐지 범위 스탐지 춘든지 고등 개발 장세로 Good morning, good morning, Gary. Geshe Gary. Uncle Gary.
지난한 더 가진 samda 아니 신이 된수 korteni shuores the chidang 신이 된수 slaungi ani gigin 된수 gigin chilaya mate thamech ranga nama sanji chupi ani gyachela pinsabi chudu thi jamba chebalaya lamngi me thame tati chidang lobjong khanda kanina ya lamngi ki levin me balaya jamdev ki shinseli khapushu roas and hadun de number sanji vi chudi janya zo de rang shigyun de tab imbanza and di namdang shiva zamgi and di gi shigyun de tu meba te and ji bi gyunda and menga soba kanji and dindi mamu ku yenza and ji giba de dembi ani nambi chelaya ani kengya yambi geginchilaya tengo bati shivaji nenga inza and disungo dasra.
We are looking at the presentation of the states of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. We're looking at the medium extent of his presentation of the states of the path to enlightenment, and the section that we're covering at the moment explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. The way to rely upon a guru or a spiritual teacher, which is for us is something that is indispensable. In a sense that when we're studying something that is so extensive, but also very profound, then we want to rely upon we need to rely upon a spiritual teacher in order to develop the knowledge of the vast and the profound. It is not only valid, this point is not only valid with respect to studying or practicing the Buddhist tradition. You can say just the same with respect to anything else that you would study. If you want to develop knowledge of something that on one hand is very extensive and on the other is also very deep and very profound, it'd be difficult to generate that knowledge just by yourself on your own accord without relying upon anyone that will teach you that. So even more so here, when we look at what we seek to do within the Buddhist tradition, our goal is to tame our mind. We want to tame our mind. In order to do that, just to become skilled in terminology, to know the words and so forth, is not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough. On top of that, we need to receive instructions for practice that need to have a lineage, right? So we need to have the lineage, the transmissions, the instructions for practice in order to be able to tame our mind. And for that end, we rely upon a spiritual teacher. And this is the section that we're covering at the moment within the presentation of the steps of the path to enlightenment.
Odiri dinzada ngazumi mamusangya dinji ani gegen sedin singi kandashi tagores kandashi hakogore sedi dachi khadu in chole de aroch negachi chagdos ine that pena tan desan roj sam tamaina manzu thirum niji gnalo ya an zambling koladi an dodo chinju roj shuj samaloji ani tani shuji chade koduya anganzi chidang sam chidana and did se matuyada unzi matuyaj and maybe nedan chayor was kansna and zambling the nangala ya only tani number sanjivi ani shonlaya ani tozongni Geshe the Khan Chiriori, Sui Chiriori, Tinji Lonia Khan, sending the Kaya Media, Manzupe, and Dandarampi, and Tadol Devana, Tontugros, Tinji Lonia Khan Sedin Jini, Lomarina Jambi, Lachek Sedin Jimbana, Peshi Omo Manga Chisu, Chanzan Dembajik, Giginji Jimbadi, Peshi Tobayo Mares. The Dindigila Suzuki, Sam Johnny, David Johnny, and Gigit Lamdation should Jambayana and Nisan Jajatamba and the Lamde Chanzanch Ragri Sangutus.
So as we cover this topic of relying upon a spiritual teacher, relying upon the Lama, it is a question that comes up quite often in the mind of many people. How will I know that such a person, that one person is a qualified spiritual teacher? If I need to rely upon a spiritual teacher, how will I know that the person that I'm looking at the moment is a qualified spiritual teacher? It is a great point. It is an important point, but in some sense, you can say that looking at this point in time, the 21st century, where globally it seems that the distances between us and others are becoming smaller and smaller, shorter and shorter, we have a better ability to assess spiritual teachers in the sense that in order to assess who is a fully qualified spiritual teacher, we can first of all check their credentials. How long have they studied? What did they study? Have they studied the great philosophical systems and so forth? We have quite a lot of information available to us on the internet. So in that sense, it is making it easier to first of all assess if someone has, let's say, some credentials, someone has done the study. If there are controversies around that person and so forth, it makes it easier to assess, and therefore you can say that in some sense we have a better ability to access those that are fully qualified spiritual teacher. You can actually find easily now those that are fully qualified, that have all the measures or all the marks of a fully qualified spiritual teacher if you know what to look for and if you do a research. So in that sense, you can say that we have all the conditions that are right for us to find someone that we can rely upon as a spiritual teacher.
어디에 디마도 지단 간다 잠빌리 나노야 다 미래를 상대로야 완자 아니 지 나인 세딩이 빼망부 레고라스 이제 나인 세딩이 참고자야 주대와이나 데니 녀다 망부치 라고여버디 페스우레다스라 사우던도 지 랑기 라바솜무트니 지기 애니 밀레야 슈지기 아니 지 친구를 슬랍데와이나 왜시 참바지다 따다 써니니 요마라스 어딘지도 투바이나 안 강한테 규칙 차고레스.
We also take into consideration that we do have different mental dispositions. When you look at the attitude of people around the world, you do find that some people have this attitude of considering themselves to be very important and speaking quite a lot about themselves. I'm like this, or I'm like that. So if you only take the word as something that is correct, something that is true, without really checking out whether they have the credential, if you just take on board the self-proclamation without making your own research or investigation, it is possible that you will run at some point into problems and difficulties. So it is also up to us, up to you, up to us to check that if we are going to rely upon a certain person, that we check, that we do a research, that we check that they have a certain credential. If that person hasn't trained themselves in the 3 trainings and they give advice or teachings to others, it is likely that things will not result well.
대승안주 신고에 찍려야 당근 조시로 차로도 되네요. 신고에 찍려야 라마 이시다 라마 소를 찍니 까들 때니 만 잠블리 나노려야 사든도 찍 노쇼 넘발이야 아니 추조 마부 추조 도줄이야 뭐니 비기 아니 소니 컨센트 템비기 아니 기시 챈데 마부 아니 덴데시니 아니 난주기려야 아니 펜도치여버디 만주 샘띵 처고야 찍 된자 안 딘디기지 아니 추조카 고절이야 아니 소주기 샘띵이 아니 로버체토여서 존나 야치 야탐바 안 디큐니 산지기 템벌에 팽기여바 산지기 템벌에 팽나 아니 심징 디기를 팽기여레 잠리 셰딜에 팽기여라스 라.
So the point that Geshe is wanting to convey here is that, for example, we know that in an organization such as this that belongs to the FPMT organization, started by Lama Geshe and Lama Sopa Rinpoche, that have established many centers, many institutions in non-Tibetan society, outside of Tibetan society. We have quite a lot of qualified Geshes that were sent to different centers to lead this study program. So if you think about it, and also in your mind, in your heart, you come to appreciate that, then you might also feel that wish or that will to be of benefit, to help as much as you can. In that sense, we will be offering service to the teachings of the Buddha, and through that also offer service to the world, to society, to sentient beings.
nani dwajle ngazu chik tsi sra ani tan hamnya kan sende ni tembi densa chembuni lo nyushil thalaya nanjul lobjon checheni ani gishi tendenge ani no sho lombala ya mantala gishi ngab chilachik ro chuchak mandawa ani ngab chil thalnala ya sajam mandawa ani yakam mandawa dinde nala ya ani gishi to dinde shicheni gyundeng pi ani gegen tsuni yoga dinde dos ta duzu ngone tanegi sanji tembale pendosnda dinde jirre mando susuchik boji ronda ani 참을 팬도시고는 다양 거리가 말아서
Isn't the Geshe up to Hasya, the FPMT chick boy, Manachi Kasaka? So, for example, last year Geshe just had a bit of a review of Geshes that have studied for more than 20 years in the big monastic institution in India, such as Sera Monastery, that then, having completed more than 20 years of studies, were sent overseas and took residence at different centers leading different study programs. More than 50 Geshes have done it, which means that there are different places around the world that people enjoy the benefit, they are reaping the benefit of the Buddha's teachings.
And Geshe showed the Nashu in like the Sanga, one time and Chadanki. Meet you much, talk you much, Geshe you much, and Chilo Deva Nazi, Zubuchinjo Nansingi, Toja Tonja Chinju, Shitse Chinju, Loja Chinju, none in this restaurant.
Anyway, having said that, Geshe is not claiming that is something, someone that is really special. No, in the great scheme of things, he's just a simple person, simple monk. No, it doesn't have a very kind of big and impressive body. It's quite small in size. His knowledge is quite limited. His mind is quite limited. He's a small-minded person, Geshe said. So, no, it doesn't make much, at least, of himself.
In a Tambutan,
Having said that, Geshe said that at least he's trying to behave in a way that is honest as possible.
Did it that Dangan's cousin something more shooting is raw. Nibanese, Churchubale, da Yurundu, Koachamba, Sor Chebatans, Sui Lama Givishin in Digi, Monsta Yurin, and in Koala Chamchin, Deva Di, and Be Sultan Denging Zodi, Lama Chagores, Yurin to Timugutus, Nilova, and the Sejetia, Lama Teres, Sivi Jamzun on the Chimney. Titsun Jinjetia, Lama Teres, Lamangambala Shubalaya, Lam Sambo Tinjetia, Lama Chagoris, Sivi Zara Chimbali, Trojetia, Lama Teres. Yujimbu Neki Nyamtabi, Neswing Member Tavatia, Lama Teres. Is a da Decha so Decha La Sobi, Me Kundum Bawa, Short Chingi, and Lama Dinza, Pe, and Chiki be. And it's chatting and Castle Tachi, so Tawadi, Lamadimba, Dushiki Gores.
So with that in mind, we're going to go back to Lama Tsongkhapa's text and pick up from the point that we left off in the previous session. Let's look at the text. So we've been looking at a way of relying upon a spiritual teacher. We have looked at a section that explains the qualities of the spiritual teacher, but also the quality of the student that relies upon a spiritual teacher. Having covered those 2 points now, Lama Tsongkhapa explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And in the previous session, we said that there are 2 ways of relying upon a spiritual teacher: in thought and in deeds, in actions. So we've looked at the way of, just look at the outline. So we started to look at the manner of relying on a spiritual teacher in thought. We've covered the first point, which is the root training in faith. And today we're going to pick up on remembering the kindness so as to generate respect for the spiritual teacher. So we begin with point B. It reads, in citing from the Sutra of the 10 Dhammas, it looks for me who has roamed in cyclic existence for a long time. The one that has looked for us is the Lama, the spiritual teacher. It awakes me from a long time of obscuration and torpor due to ignorance. That also the spiritual teacher. It pulls me out as I sink into the ocean of existence. That's the Lama, the spiritual teacher. He shows good paths to me who has entered bad ones. He frees me who has been bound in the prison of existence. He is a doctor to me who has long been tormented by illness. The Lama is being like a doctor to us. I should generate the notion of him as the rain clouds of pacifying me who has been ablaze with the fire of attachment and so forth. So in this way, we think of the Lama, the spiritual teachers, in order to become mindful, to remember the kindness, in order to appreciate the kindness of a spiritual teacher.
Leda nyumu wangi kewale leda nyumu wangi chi leda nyumu wangi ki leda nyumu wangi chi zu ko jate ya di telepa gen ani drama to ya di ani mumbi wangi maribi wangi chadang ki ti wangi lesan khorde yo chi ro ta dinu dem bache wala ya ani mari badili tha bache wala ya ani lamde nangi chi mena randab ji ani John knew me about it. Kyo Toma me want Tandabatu Korde or Tig drip to yours. In the Tele Pa Lamden Nangidi, and Mari Bigi, Nimbo, Mari Badi, Loshinjolo Yimba, Yendan Yinu Tolaya, Lamden Sistawa Nangingi, Plavin Metamenza, Lamat Sorgo said. Tichagos, Rock.
So the first line in this section says, it looks for me who has roamed in cyclic existence for a long time. So we have been roaming in cyclic existence for such a long time. In cyclic existence in which, under the power of karma and afflictive states of mind, we take a rebirth, then we die. And again, we take a rebirth, and then we die. And again, we take a rebirth, and again, we die. And again, we go through the cycle of birth and death without going beyond that. So how is it that we cannot go beyond the cycle of death and birth? It is because we've been under the control of afflictive states of mind. The root of afflictive states of mind is ignorance. And due to ignorance, afflictions arise. We perform actions, and in that process, again and again, we find ourselves going through samsara, through cyclic existence. So in order to go beyond that process, we need to address ignorance. We need to be free from ignorance. But then to be free from ignorance is something that we cannot do just by ourselves, because taking into consideration that we've been going through that process again and again since time without beginning and up until now, it's indicative that just by ourselves, on our own accord, we haven't been able to break free from that process. So we need to rely upon a guide, someone that will tell us, that will teach us how to eliminate ignorance, how to break free from ignorance so that we can live the process of birth and death and birth and death. We need someone that will point it out to us. That first of all, that ignorance is a consciousness that is in error. It is an erroneous consciousness. But not only that, also to explain to us the way in which ignorance is a consciousness that is in error. How is it mistaken with respect to reality? And then also how then to eliminate that error in order to eliminate ignorance. We haven't been able to do it just by ourselves on a code. So therefore relying upon a spiritual teacher for us is something that is indispensable.
Dene dagi Geshe chema chugu yongde yonsu tenjete chanju sembi jolo non tempa yinshi semchi samni dirwon sos.
Then we have another quotation from this array of Stokes Sutra. It also says, "These are my spiritual friends, expounders of Dharma, exhaustively teaching the qualities of all phenomena, thoroughly teaching the conduct of bodhisattvas. With these thoughts in mind, I have come here."
Tere da kanji chanju sembi gi jobasla no malana ani cholom yabu te nganzu la ya kaswata nganzu gi cholom di chagdang gi xiangwan du song cholom chi mangche dindi chago ras da kanji ani rangche ban zimbatang jen yaw terbi gi konon dindi chi ki thoni cholom di kyong di teni kaddu ina ya nyogda chagde ya chi kaddu ina dramatigo yongde ya di ani di to gi yongu yobdi anta seshin thaba tinza chanju sembi choba de karasana rang chiban zimbi chinzingi ani sabla ya ani jen chiban zimbi chinzingi lo de shani ani di thoni ani cholom pyongdi kuntan tumba chik ro kum gaya chik chagu yobdi gyacha gyadam res tinza dimchi ki cholom di nganzu ranto gi shingme ma de suit yongosna lama gi shini yongres o yongres ro.
So this section says, "These are my spiritual friends, expounders of the Dhamma, exhaustively teaching the qualities of all phenomena, thoroughly teaching me the conduct of bodhisattvas." Now, thinking of the conduct of bodhisattvas, what is it? What is the way that bodhisattvas behave? Well, first off, we can think of the way that we behave. We've been under the sway of afflictive states of mind. We've been under the control of anger, attachment, and so forth. And through that, we came to cherish ourselves and neglect other sentient beings, disregard other sentient beings. And since we find ourselves under the control of these afflictive states of mind and entrenched in an attitude of cherishing ourselves, there's always something that is not quite right for us. Things do not work for us in the way that we want them to. There's always something that goes wrong. So then, since this is what has been happening to us all along, then when we look at our situation and try to find a way out of it, then what we need to do is to leave that attitude of cherishing ourselves behind. So rather than still continue to try to get what we want through cherishing ourselves, we discard that and we develop a greater attitude of cherishing other living beings. And as such, we'll become more harmonious with others, in agreement with others, will be more popular, or amongst others will have a greater sense of affinity to us. So this is the conduct of bodhisattvas that is referred to in this section.
Terdinza dada kibi dag matavas ro tindigi kunjul labortingi ani rangi matav yonde oma dibi mamanda chanju yana yonsu jongani Geshe dada nebo number 2 Geshe thaji embatavadi durji chamber lawan jachinda danya tav dawa nyakam dawa yonsu zobatav karbichu and geba chingi danya tav shivi chok tengi and nimatav jada troll road davatis jada chok pil and khandaj leva ya gyowa meba road davati and givishingi gyamso shen to mutuk sem the day yonsu kyon the nyamba davashi tendi sem you know some don't so.
Then it says, as they give birth to all that, they are like my mother. As they give milk of virtues, they are like nurses. They cleanse me completely by means of enlightenment's branches. These spiritual friends completely exercise harm. They are like doctors releasing from death and old age. Showering rain of nectar, they are like the Lord Indra. Like the full moon, they flourish with white qualities. With white qualities meaning with positive qualities. They show the side of peace
just like bright sunlight. Regarding friends and foes, they are like mountains, in that they're stable without being susceptible to a biased attitude, holding some as friends and other as foes. So regarding friends and foes, they are like mountains being stable. They have minds as undisturbed as the sea. They give perfect support, some say, like boatmen. With this in mind, I, Shuddhana, have come here.
Chanju samba dagi lo jeba. Sanji sevo chanju ke jeba. Nada dashe sanji ngabashi. Tede givi semgin donso. Jigden kibi po tawati debe gwanta kyausu kiwaye. Nada dala tedu mi inshi. Tenji semgi gish. Nyingurchi che somba ter tsusu chebi. Yangi kyan tembar chade. Dala tsun demba girchin nozan dala demba giros nozan sing tsalya suzu mi june gyun dengogris.
And the text continues in saying, Bodhisattvas bring forth my understanding. Buddha's children cause enlightenment. These beings, these friends of mine, are praised by the Buddha. With such a virtuous mind, I have come here. As they saved the world, they are like heroes. They have become the captains, protectors, and refuge. They are like the eye bestowing happiness on me. With thoughts like this, I honor my spiritual friends. So we had that quotation from the Array of Stock Sutra. And at the end, Lama Tsongkhapa says, you should remember the thoughts expressed here by means of attuned to aspiring to act yourself for Shuddhana. So you can look at this verse and insert your name to this verse rather than referring to Shuddhana. You can say, with this in mind, I, such and such, have come here. Bodhisattva bring forth my understanding and so on and so forth. With that in mind, I, Shuddhana, have come here.
Ani odir dadi dombuko bindo se sanjirangi son ra and dindi son das dini tan do shemba le ya teda tedawa ka mangula son yoris do shemba dindi le ya nanzu tangbu ki di chibu ki waris tama chide chibu rogo waris tinza nanzu le ya lamde nangi inji minji ani givishin sal ko waris sanjirangi son na dindi yoris and leba tamji tengi padan dawadia givishin iris nyeba tamji dawaching madan dawadia givishin iris and matamji sawaching no dawadia givishin dukes and the cousin can those time ba those sali jami teme odina yor odina yor dindi res the dot laja jigda.
So such qualities of a spiritual teacher are mentioned not only in this sutra, but also in many other sutras that were taught by the Buddha. Such qualities and importance of relying upon a spiritual teacher is mentioned. It is said that we are born alone, and upon death we also proceed alone, we go alone. So that the one that can assist us to go beyond the process of death and death and death and death is the spiritual teacher. That is referred to in different sutras by different qualities, like a father, for example, that helps us to overcome faults, like a mother that helps us to illuminate our good qualities and so forth.
Lamrim chere mado sanji che mare son dengi dindi ani chungyoris chungdo aspa inya anji lami gevishinye la teni sanji che nyamsul denso di sanji rang gomba imba mato bigi ani pegu lama su rangsu cheja wa maimba di ani sanji su korano le siu shoji tengo res ra.
So the different Buddhist traditions. Here we follow the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and some in the past have termed this tradition to be Lamaism, in a sense that it's a tradition that emphasizes the Lamas. But then when you look at what the lamas, the spiritual teachers teach, they teach only the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha. It's not that the lamas came up with their own sets of teachings. It's important to make that point. It is important to make that point that when we follow lama, spiritual teacher, it's not that we just follow something that they've made up. We follow those that teach us the words of the Buddha.
These are the Dindigi, Sanjing Sona Shin, and Lamgitzawa, Singing and Shishabi Tony, and Tuzon Consum, Chezun Sum, Yamatre Tony, and that Longotonta Rilaya, and Sanji Tembalea, Chawachevanza, and then Zamni Shashok, Lombo Mombunalia, Nancho Tayonaya, and Pug Nancho di Geshe things substitute Tayadia. And garden till then Choya Badi, Geshe Yatambadi is ra.
And in following the spiritual teachers that teach us the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, we then engage with those teachings through study, reflection, and meditation. So the engagement of the teachings with study, reflection, and meditation has been done for thousands of years, for hundreds of years, for centuries, by great masters. Buddhism is spread to different corners in Asia. When you look at the way that Buddhism has taken root in Tibet, for centuries, Tibetan masters have been engaged with study, reflection, and meditation in a very extensive way and profound way in the teachings of the Buddha. So you can say that this is a tradition in which the teachings of the Buddha has been able to be preserved in the most profound way.
This is Danganzuji, Nanju Saba Tarsagi, Nusho Lombatsu Naman, Danganzu Nanchu Tolaya, Legachigoras, in the Lamdim to Chimachi, and Lamdim Nanging, Lalin Tanging Tan Jovaino, and Momba, and Lombate Telea, Sanji Dembi, so only two to each, Tindiji Majomaina, and P. Dechi, and in Yenshi Chivasang Tolan, Rodevaina, Tindiji Chadugras, Ra.
So then when we think of how then we proceed from this point onward to the future, if we want Buddhism also to take a very firm root in a place like that, that will make it possible to enjoy the extensiveness and also the profundity of the Buddhist tradition, then it is also up to us to make sure that we engage in study, reflection, and meditation in an extensive way. It's not enough just to speak, just to listen to teachings or to give teachings. Also, the aspects of study, reflection, and meditation need to be implemented in order for the Buddhist tradition to become available in a profound and extensive way.
Then the Monde Saurasra, the Monde Saur, cousin of the Digi, Konda Digi, Shandi, Kondanga, Kadula, Nil Sama, and Nilamatsunga, good church question, and the Shujavach Zawanini, Chengumados. Then the Korang Chengana. Konda Supia on the Lamatsunga, because the bed chair to us. Narang Temdi Shuch, Gaushu Chansra.
Now, Geshe said that his personal traits, one of his personal traits is being having a bit of blind faith. Now, so as you came up today, for the people at home, there are a few people here at the Gompa attending these teachings today. So as you came up today to the Gompa, you've passed through the Nalanda Master's garden. Now, when you look at the statues, it seems that Lama Tsongkhapa's statue is bigger than the other statues, slightly bigger. Now, I guess I cannot remember if that was the original intention. I cannot remember if he has indicated or asked for the statue to be slightly bigger, but this is how it came about. Do you remember, was it deliberately done like that, or it's just kind of happened that Lama Tsongkhapa's statue was made to a bigger proportion?
My recollection is that Geshe asked a little bit like Lama Tsongkhapa, if you could make something a bit bigger than you certainly should.
But was it specifically with respect to Lama Tsongkhapa, or?
I think so, yeah. I think.
No, sir. dilashing marada umulu the power to me kuli cheje in course the ngiti tikiran siwiyona yawudas ngitso in sam and think yazo chen chengmundste think love machine and rastra.
So I guess I can't remember if there was like, if he actually said that. Kind of when he thinks about it now, kind of it's a bit, it says that he would approach that with a sense of trepidation. To ask for statues that would be more impressive, bigger and impressive than Nagarjuna and Sangha is something that Geshe says that it's a bit uncomfortable. So Geshe is not saying that you got it wrong, Gary, but he doesn't remember kind of being very explicit about it.
I think maybe one thing was that it was a very important time for Lamrim Karpa. Like there was a lot of focus on Lamrim Karpa at that time.
Yeah, peche di kabdilas janibotitola dende peche kechama dende juyo saresa peche dila tene dende juyo.
Lamzunga ko shangwa di mand nalent master garden shangwa di jenumjita gomanyangin de lo tuje ko tudeng zego tabkin shang dis jachi tam res nengi ku sed la wata ko shangwa gyze taran res.
Yeah, it was around the time that we have celebrated the 600th anniversary for Lamrim Karpa. So that's why probably it was on our mind at that point in time. But Geshe can't remember if there were specific instructions about the size, the measurements of the statue.
Lama Adishag, Kadam Chodendi, Injimini Shango, Machindachi, Moranda, the Dulceta, Lama Adishag, Kunda Shayana Soba, and it didn't chick Sama Adishag Garden, Lama Adishag Garden said, Do Chion, Chick Temdi Doge, Kanji, Mambalaya, and Tandi Chalang, Chick Kaukalia, Divodo, Kaukala, Mandivodoji, a young dig or the India, Jata Manganso, and a Kalidi. And Muntin Jam Drovaina, Mambangan di, and Himag Lama number 2, touch Gomba Yovananshi, Kolikyavanashingi, Manjun Jukyong Tuyachita, got Dembalaya, and Dembi Tayovanza, and Yungros Ra, and Yatam Ichis.
Anyway, so we have the Nalanda Masters Garden. Now, this group of 8 Nalanda Masters are part of a bigger group of 17 foremost masters from the Nalanda tradition. So we had an opening day for the garden of the Nalanda Masters Garden. Then a couple of people that were inspired and enthused about it have started to come up with plans of extending the garden. So someone came up with an idea of creating an Atisha garden. Atisha is one of those 17 great masters of Nalanda. So getting a statue made of Atisha and also the Kadampa stupa that is associated with Atisha. So yeah, we have now more plans for the future. Now, it will take time to create everything. And all along, when we look at the situation of the center, of ourselves, the world, and so forth, yeah, we go up and down. There are good times and there are times that are more difficult. So that will still continue to happen, but still, you can say that if we have those statues, and they will remain with us for a very long time as we go through those motions, Geshe reckons that we'll be able to still remind ourselves that those masters of the past have worked really hard in order to provide those teachings to us, so that we'll also be inspired to still apply our mind to the progression along the steps of the path as it was shown to us, demonstrated to us by those great masters.
And the Chinese Institute, Lamrim Kandi, Lamrim Kandi Matobi, and she Shambakaya Maris, Manzadelia, Chapsi Tapsaro Mari, Manzadichi, and Kundachibu Sham de Sachia Mari, Manzadichi Kandu John de Manzanam Chu, Jean Chen Ka Titlia, Lomye Chesagi, Lomye Kanji, and ungkiyo thambo chu ta chi senso ban na shingi manzu di tola ya ani khomba kya ko ya di ani keche shu dres ine kunda shine to ngara na gawo yusra.
Having said that, our main purpose, the main thing that we do here is not just to build statues. As Geshe said a few times before, the title of the center is Chenrezig Institute, which indicates that the main thing that we do here is we focus on the teachings of the Buddha and we expand our mind. We study the teachings of the Buddha, we become knowledgeable in our practice. So this is the main thing that we focus on. It's not about politics, it's not about creating statues, we're not just saying prayers or doing ceremonies. The main focus as was, you could say, has been indicated to us is that we should focus on studies, and this is why this center was called to begin with Chenrezig Institute. So although Geshe says that no, it does like statues and so forth, it does like to build statues and so forth, still the main purpose is to make sure that we continue with our studies so that we become more learned, more informed about what the Buddha said.
That treasure to chasda nganzo da ji hlomye gi teni tsuyala ya hlomye chingi gogoras hlomye chingi zo chingi di ani sangha godas da thanda phardu nganzo ji ani sangha zo da yagu peyores da yine ya zo di kharso da pi gonglo ya spe na modo ani sangha le shungi ma chong wanza ani ji gonglo ya spe za di nganzo lega khar cheba ine ya ro ani this chik kalakhago ro kazu unu subi channe kanji tone ani kalakhago mangwala ya chik to shin ki ani chong ni shi chong bai na yacha yada mangan ji shima tembu chik dagaran chuktu dogres ro man khadi namanam de gyagis.
And another point of Geshe I wanted to make, since we have already started to speak about matters like that, is that not only it is an institution, but we also have a small monastic community here at this center. So looking at our background, Geshe reckons that most of us have encountered the Buddhist tradition and also decided to become ordained in a later stage of our life, right? So most of us haven't done that when we were young. And we are an aging community. So when you get older, it's harder for you to do things. It's not as easy to work hard, to study and so forth as you could when you were younger. So Geshe feels that in the future, if we have a core group of young people that decide to become monastics and spend the time in studying and so forth, that would be such a good creation of a very stable foundation for such a community. So Geshe is making prayers, is having aspiration that in the future, may we get 15 or 20 young and able-bodied people that will decide to come forward and do it. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we might think that this is, how do you say it in English? Empty expectations.
Labasum de Murming Zambayan, Dubu Chogin and the Yong Kanshin. Dao the Shidu Chinese in the one to the Choju Gitasho set. On the Delia, the Kurgodas, Ramalam di.
Well, maybe it's hard to think about it happening now, but still, when you look at some of the aspirational prayers that are made in the great monasteries, one of them is making an aspiration for monastic communities, monastic institutions to still flourish, so that those wearing the robes will still come together for study, reflection, and meditation. And through that, will ensure that the teachings of the Buddha, of the Muni, will still flourish. Actually, maybe this is one of the verses that we also need to add to our prayers, so that we will still continue to aspire to the creation of a good and stable community.
Even is the Lamang of Jubali, Lamang of Jubatia, Garaki, Babi, Yana, Chiksungre, Kungsenaya, Kungzesha Kichires.
Tayang Malve.
Tayang Reve. the kanji jagargi nalendra hebenchi insares ra namangab jubale derman hebi chishugo lama giche kancha mini chekon pambane teda tela bebta mudu heben jenresi dojin zima ni sonwa shin ubo tamji gi lama yonsu nyebarcha shesoma tars
We already do this prayer.
Sorry?
We do this prayer from meditation arranged when we do our evening practice. On page 338, the last one.
Page 338, the last one.
There's something doing there.
It's not this one. I'll look for the.
The flourishing of Joseph.
Well, I'll look for that later. So anyway, Geshe said, then as we're looking at the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, we've covered a section of relying upon a spiritual teacher in thoughts. Now we're going to look at relying upon a spiritual teacher through actions. There are 3 points made with respect to that. The need to rely through actions, condensed explanation of the 3 means of pleasing a spiritual teacher and the extensive explanation of those 3. Let's begin with the need for reliance through actions. And it says in the 50 verses on Guru, what need is there to say a lot of words here? Do everything to make your Guru happy, abandon everything displeasing him, apply yourself to that, examine that. This was said by Vajradhara himself, spiritual attainments follow the Guru. Aware of this, use everything there is and make your Guru absolutely happy. In brief, you tried hard to please him and to abandon whatever he does not like.
Then Kananzu Delia and the Kashi persons Anganzu Digi shed their Kabdu the Tondi that any Shengen Korandi Kachim Shuchi Sigor Saving number of Tom Sigros the Dindi and Dinditsawin Maris and the colors and colors and Jatan Kayomata choosing in the Injimiji Manum Jaya Sodrota Ra. And each sort of Mamma Shuchiki and Dindi Chen Degoras, Inaya, Sancham de Chudi, and Malam Jaya, the Ichichiwatsa, Saunini, Mumba, Pigi, Tachi Shimjia Chichin, Janchin, Drogoyachik, and Janshik Netia, and one the Tanik Insabu Shuch, Muyun is Shuchilaya, and Shuchi Yovach, Inza, did long indeed. 인증이 약부질이야 땡고르세 디차고르스 로 디시비스 먼저.
So we have a couple of people that have just joined us. So hi everyone. If you wonder what are we talking about, I guess I just wanted to put it in context. We're looking at a section in the text, in a greater text that explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So it's not that we just want to create situation in which we put someone on a pedestal and just venerate or become devoted to that person. We put it in a certain context. First of all, we have different religions, different spiritual traditions that employ practices of saying a lot of prayers, different rituals, developing faith and trust in different things. The Buddhist tradition does not suffice with just making prayers or doing certain rituals. The main purpose is to use certain analytical tools, analytical means in order to get an insight into reality, to understand better the way that reality works. For that, we rely upon someone that teaches us how to develop those logical means, using which we can analyze reality, we can assess reality in order to develop a greater understanding.
Rebenan Chundin some Shivaina and the number Sanji Vichu Namolaya, Tenjong said, Song Digi, Nanzuchi, and Tontu Tosumgi, and it Chuk under Jimbayanaya, and it then in John Madopi, Madeva Rawan Wundi Tribashi, and it's our in the Mevachi, Song Yoris, Bena Sujim Chinere, Sujima in Bichinere, Kandajimbayanaya, and 그 텐종마도베 라운드 트바치 유코랑 된 셈 얘기메바치 아니 론니 동갑기 공이야 아니 때문에 세부 진 송요레스 다 단디 대상 그 세리버 주다 아니 숲돌이야 아니 제들 치온디게 아니 둘티 피리야 숲파 제온디 드팅 톨로 투로야 드팅티야 지 아니 통화 메바질이야 투로야 마도 유코랑은 도도 얘기 메바디 콘수 문제 치투거렸다 시니 베게 양분센 남산이 위치가 나눠야 론이 동갑지 주지 공이야 샹사 세우진 때나 파우샤기지 인생관주 딘지니 창을로 아니 장고에 차고 그랬어
So we want to develop a systematic way of analyzing reality. Like, for example, the Buddha taught a philosophical topic that is called dependent origination, dependent arising, in which he said that whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we touch, whatever we come in contact with, whatever exists only in dependence on and in relation to others. Nothing exists independently. So if you then look at different phenomena, physical phenomena, phenomena that are not physical, whatever exists, the Buddha said that nothing exists by itself independently. Whatever exists only in dependence on in relation to others. So we might not think about it normally, or we might not look at certain phenomena in that way, but when we then start to analyze different types of phenomena, physical phenomena, non-physical phenomena, we can then see the way that whatever exists can only exist in dependence on in relation to others. Like, for example, when you look at contemporary science, the analysis and investigation of different materials, you get down to their molecular level, atomic level, subatomic level, and so forth. And you can see in contemporary science that even in a subatomic level, it's not that you find particles that exist completely onto themselves, independently, without depending upon anything else. So this process of analysis and investigation that tries to discover either a sense of dependency. When you look for something, you try to find an independent existence, that cannot be found, because the more you analyze and investigate, the more you see that things have this kind of infinite way of depending or relying upon other things. That was the thing that was taught by the Buddha 2,600 years ago. So those are the things that we study. Those are the things that we need to study.
디기 가다 팽기어리스라운디 디기 난주기 더 동학기지기 착당라야 아니 네버디 디톤이 연구여레스 지 용당 간다치 연구여레스라운디 유딩니 트버지 여바이나 아니 로디파 아니 진사치 차데치 디 여바이나 베나 차바케사치 아니 콘트로사자치 유딩 권한은 용대버치 디 자원이 메온디기 피기 진사 창사 자원이 메온디 차바케사단 콘트로사사기 유디 아니 대응무비 내줄에 메버치 아니 문제 지온디 차단 거야라야 아니 탑초도 겨 데리라 니차고레스 로
And why is it important to understand this reality of dependent origination? Well, from a Buddhist perspective, looking at the different experiences of suffering, pain, or other unwanted states, they all arise from afflictive states of mind, from anger, attachment, and so forth. And we experience harm and injury because of those states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth. And anger, attachment, and such afflictive states of mind, they view phenomena as if they exist objectively, as if there is an objective reality out there. And because our mind grasps that objective existence, anger arises as something that is conceived to be objectively existent. Attachment arises in conceiving a particular thing as if it exists objectively like that, as anger or attachment sees it. So when you then develop an insight into the way that phenomena exist, you see that they do not exist objectively in the object himself. There's a different reality, a different level of existence. And this is why it's important to understand this view of dependent origination that negates that objective existence. So this is something that we have to study, that we want to train it. And for that end, we now look at the person that we rely upon in order to study that. So we can continue with the text. Then the condensed explanation of the three means of pleasing a teacher through relying upon a spiritual teacher in actions say the three means of pleasing the guru are: 1, offering him material things; 2, serving them and paying him with respect and with body and speech; and the third one is practicing in accordance with his advice. In this regard, it says in the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, through homage, offering purely obtained, and service and practice, you should rely on a spiritual friend. It says in the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, through homage, offerings purely obtained, and service and practice, you should rely on a spiritual teacher. When it says through homage, offerings purely obtained, and service, those are parts of ways of relying upon a spiritual teacher, which is an important part. Geshe says that at least based upon his own personal experience that he gained in following his root teacher's spiritual teacher, he says how in relying upon a spiritual teacher in a particular way, your mind is developed. In that, just when you look at that in terms of a relationship that you form with another person, you want to form a relationship that is based on trust, complete trust. So you have a sense of respect to another person that is based on trust. You completely trust them, and they, in return, also develop a sense of trust in you. So when we have a relationship, just any type of relationship that is just based on deep trust, it's still possible that you go through a difficult time. There are some things that happen to you at different point in your life, but with that deep sense of trust, you can speak about it, you can address that. When you rely upon a spiritual teacher and you have that sense of trust in that relationship, then when they trust you, they can also point out to you things that are not done in the right way. Even as far as things are really simple and trivial, even as far as how you eat your food, how you dress up, and so forth.
Rangi tamsik pepe ni bumu putan chumatan ranso kita tenjano longju yo pechubus.
So we looked at the condensed explanation of the three means of pleasing a spiritual teacher. Let's look at the extensive explanation of these three, beginning with offering material things. We begin again with the 50 verses on the Guru, and it says, through things not given, your children, your wife, and through your life, you should always rely on the master of your commitments. Needless to say, through fickle possessions.
That is a Tandi Tudelia, and Giging Chedu, Pudan Chomadan, So Ledan Sedi, Kawushu Chagonza, and on the Chu Chindia, Tetsamado, and Juktu Yomaros, put the Choma Ledan Pashan, put the Chomalia, and sing about Lavna, and Peshi Giging Ganga and Chomi Yanga, or Digital Gigin like Dindichimadun Dushimavina, and Gigin Guni, Sanji Children Juicy, Jaja Jatam Batini, Yom Siwachik.
Now let's look at this verse again. Through things not given, your children, your wife, and through your life, you should always rely on the master of your commitment. So this translation is a bit vague. You could also translate it in a kind of paraphrase this translation and saying, if you cannot give up any of those things, your children, your partner, your wife, your partner, and other things, and through your life, you should always rely on the master of your commitment. So can we, in some sense, relinquish some of the strong grasping that we have at certain things in our life, our family members, our children, our partner, and so forth, to give up some of it and make some time or space to rely upon a spiritual teacher? If we find that we cannot even do that, it'd be really difficult to entrust yourself to rely upon a spiritual teacher to be able to expand your mind.
대전 산기 탐절라 따도 보원이 줄스 대불소는 초인데 초등으로 초 줄스 시송도 따르스.
And then it says, and giving that amounts to always offering gifts to all the Buddhas, offerings that accumulates merit, which turns into the highest cities.
That 저기 담분이 기계 약부치야 때모투와이노 되니 고고 심치니 아니 소소려야 년가용이 디차고레스 송구나노려야 비 라마 첸데 기겐 첸데 질려야 되니 아니 오네기지 산지기 추 동하 용수조바 아니 제퉁인기 낭퉁인기 라마질려야 땜바이나 아니 딘지 라마질려야 다 소소려 요초든 burtuwaina 아니 우주 초트 규그레스 or 디승고라스 디 피레야 칼케니 아니 고급 선등이 레바이나 단요르 차고레스 로
카가토네스나 데 체니만테.
제전 디 라마가 딘지 고레스라지 아니 라메 민케니.
So we spoke about the qualities of a fully qualified spiritual teacher. Now, if you do not rely upon someone that has those qualifications, you go for someone else that doesn't have those qualifications of a spiritual teacher, then you can end up in dangerous situations. So you have to make sure that if you are going to rely upon a spiritual teacher, that from your side, you have assessed the person and you've found that they have the right qualities of a spiritual teacher. And then once you do that and you find that they have those right qualifications, then when you rely upon them, you might make offerings of all the material things that you have, that you can give. And as the text says, then you follow a process by which you will attain spiritual attainments. So you have to make sure that the person that you rely upon is a fully qualified spiritual teacher. If you don't ensure that you have made that you have assessed the person, that you have checked it yourself, and you go for someone that doesn't have those qualities or that have the opposite of those qualities, well, you will end up in difficulties and problems.
진짜 베나 다 당분이 그 랑긴 남주 페이지 제제네 라마 타와탄자 질이야 케게 무공이 질이야 텐투와나 녀그릇 차고 말했어 비 라마 비 사상 요교로다 다 디디질 템바이나 다 아니 사상 로버디 베나 다지 초마 용이 질이 템바이나 다 라마 디기 코랑 초마 요디 초마 디기 ngoso 고로스 초미 찌고 니고슬라운디 다디 소소라 메나 다디 체가르디 게투 짜니 말라라는 차고라서 So
then when you look at the process of looking for a spiritual teacher, so you can have different scenarios. Geshe feels that a good scenario that you could assess in a spiritual teacher is that if they're a monastic, they're a monk or a nun, in the sense that they don't have outside pressures to assemble wealth or money and so forth. If you rely upon someone that is in a family situation, it is possible that they will also be under the constraint of having to have to earn money. If they're in a relationship, the partners would say that they need this and that or this and that. So in that sense, Geshe feels that relying on a monastic in some sense is a better situation than relying upon someone that is in a relationship.
솔라부치 소는 구속은 제부카레스는 조금 문제들이스 딘자코 아니 만삼메규 텔라는 제부강도 더버 6 7 만신기 아니 규 용수 상원디 제부디 슈마투 레인고라스라.
So the section says, giving that amounts to always offering gifts to all the Buddhas. So if you rely upon a spiritual teacher that is fully qualified, and for you, they represent the enlightened qualities of body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. In that sense, they represent the qualities of the Buddha. Making offerings to them, it amounts to making offerings to all the Buddhas. And as such, as this verse says, offerings that accumulates merit, which turns into the highest cities, which means that that will bring about your own state of enlightenment.
축구 인체 친단 용요 소탄 이 용된 job 소소스 데 순반 대답 담발은 뭔가 버트바이나 티니 조인디 게르데 펜비 랜드 초버 차원이 고위치지 냠슬람바이스 시송소.
Then looking at the two other ways of relying in actions, we have serving and paying respect with body and speech, so bathing him, anointing him, massaging him, wrapping him up, cleaning him, nursing him when he's ill and so forth, and talking about his excellent qualities. Now, practicing in accordance with the advice or with the teachings is practicing without going against your instructions, this being the main one. In the Garland of Birth Stories, it says the offering to be made in return for his help is practiced in accordance with his instructions.
Thank you.
So thank you. All right, so let's leave it here for today. I'll put the dedication prayers on the screen. Kewadi nyududa lama sange drugyune drowa chikyama lupa de salagopa sho chancho sancho rinpoche make pananke girchi kewanyamba lupa gome kondo pewa sho rirawe ko peshinkan penlandewa malu chubwen chenre simwante zinyato shape site padu tenkyo chi to so chin jang sing away kon so
Lemon to so to sing on the shaggy show. Abasum de Murmin Zambayan, David Sojin in the Yonkans, Tao the Shidu Chavis, and they went to the children give it Trashi show.
So Geshe made that dedication phrase, may those who wear the robes, flourish, may they be able to come together to get involved in study, reflection, in debate, and through that, make the teachings of the Buddha flourish. So we'll find this verse and add it to the list. Thank you.
So,
Okay.